DeSantis suspends state attorney for refusing to enforce bans on child surgeries and abortion restrictions. This morning, Ron DeSantis did this announcement where he basically said this George Soros-backed state attorney was outright refusing to enforce the law in a blanket statement. And he was like, look, it's one thing if you use your discretion on an individual basis. Like, okay, this guy shouldn't be charged with this crime for this one reason. Here's why. It's another thing when you come out and you sign a document saying, I will never enforce the law. So Ron DeSantis, as the executive of Florida, suspended the state's attorney and then put in a temporary replacement to actually enforce the law. This is tremendous. George Soros recently issued a statement. He published an op-ed saying he will not back down from this. He will keep funding district attorneys to reform the system, or I should say he will keep fighting to reform the system of prosecution because it's not working for our communities. It's creating distrust between the people and the police. The crazy thing is this guy is either completely evil or dumb as a box of rocks. And considering his wealth, he's as wealthy as he is, I don't think he's that stupid. If you look at what's happening in San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, yeah, I don't think anyone's going to be convinced this plan is working. You look at San Francisco and they recalled that guy, Chesa Boudin or whatever his name is. They recalled him. The new person who came in says they're going to go after all the drug dealers now. So clearly whatever it is that Soros is thinking he's funding is pissing everybody off. Ron DeSantis, he's draining that swamp. It's one of the first major moves I've seen from any executive to go against these corrupt state's attorneys. We'll see if anyone goes after the district attorneys, to the extent that they can. But this is huge victory for accountability, and maybe we'll start seeing some stuff. And then on top of that, I'll just add this before throwing it to you guys. Donald Trump said he was going to fire everybody. I dig it. Ron DeSantis just fired a guy. I mean, he didn't really suspended him, but I think that's fairly promising for if Ron DeSantis ends up running for president 2024.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I got mixed feelings about authorities using their power to just fire somebody that's not bending to their will. But there is a reason for that.
It's not his will, though. It's just the law
that he set into place.
He didn't put the law in place.
Personal
people
will.
voted. People voted for a legislature who then passed bills and had them signed. Then it got a sufficient amount of votes, and then Ron DeSantis is like, sign the bill. And then this guy he issued a statement. He was like, I am signing a statement saying I will never enforce that law.
So hopefully if DeSantis has integrity, even if it's a law he personally disagrees with, he would do the same thing.
Yeah. I think the second part of what I was saying is that sometimes the authority, the reason they have the ability to fire somebody that's not bending to their will is because, we need authority. We need a strong leader. At least society, our species, since the dawn of time, has like the military commander, the commander in chief, the one that's like, put them up against the wall, or whatever. They're like, you're not gonna support the military cause. You're a danger to our freedom and our survivability. I have the ability to do with you what I will.
But the power here that's being exercised, it's limited. Ron DeSantis doesn't decide what the law is. He does, however, it is within his duties to make sure that if other people within government aren't doing their jobs, if they're derelict of duty or negligent, that he removes them. And that's in the Constitution. I'm so surprised to see such a bold move because it feels like, especially with the Republican Party, they just sit on their hands. Now Ron DeSantis is like, he came out and he just went at it. And he was like, nah, get him out of there. Here's boom, executive order.
Did it say, is this like a temporary suspension?
They're trying to make it permanent, but they've put someone else in place.
What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with the left. The left is supportive of local control and localism when it suits its purposes, and then it's supportive of centralized control and authority when it doesn't. And so, here you've got somebody who's a prosecutor who's essentially involved in prosecutorial nullification, right? Essentially, you've got a duly enacted statute that's passed by the Florida legislature, signed into law by the governor, and this prosecutor is refusing to enforce the law, as you said, Tim, right? He's not just exercising discretion on individual cases. He's saying, he's basically giving the finger to the people of the state of Florida by refusing to enforce the law. So, it is good to see someone stand up and say, no, you are going to do this.
Yo.
You are going to follow the law. You are going to apply it. And in a red state where there are these blue enclaves, right? That this is a red state and this is the way we do things here.
Let me read this quote. In June of 2021, he signed a letter saying that he would not enforce any prohibitions on sex change operations for minors. Sex changes are really disfiguring these young kids, and he said it doesn't matter what the legislature does in the state of Florida. Florida has said you cannot perform sex change operations on children. This guy said he would not enforce a prohibition on that. I just got to say, I don't think anyone predicted, because we had Rick Santorum here. I don't think anyone predicted that slippery slope meant within 10 years you would have children getting sex change surgeries. Now, a bunch of news outlets, they refer to it as gender affirming healthcare. And I take issue with that because that is not what Ron DeSantis said specifically. Ron DeSantis is citing surgery, operations, like going to children. I don't think society would tolerate breast implants. That's a gender affirming treatment, right?
No, gender
There's
is a
limitations.
psychological thing. It has, once you start to carve up physical bodies, it's sex. That's or it's at least non-sexual surgery.
Right.
Gender is an idea. It's a concept. It's a way of feeling. Once you start cutting into it, man, that's another.
I would
that's the
agree
post-
that gender is a feeling.
That's-
I think
that's
it's
the
very
post-
much
how you identify.
biological.
But gender identity is different from gender. So these are postmodern definitions of what gender is.
That's a
Gender
good
was
point.
used since it started coming into prominence in the 50s to specifically mean biological sex.
That's very confusing because sex means sex. Gender means gender. So they're different words with different meanings. That's very important.
So that's actually a new concept.
It's so funny.
The
Different
divorce
words mean
between the
different
word
things.
gender and sex is new.
Yeah.
So that you can have the identity be anything you want.
But I thought it used to be your sex was what your gonads basically, and then your gender was how you identified, and it didn't have to be.
no one identified
new.
as anything. They were just
What they were.
Yeah, in
They
like
were
the
just what they
50s,
were.
it appeared that this idea of gender was like in the 50s or something like that.
So the word
Maybe
the word gender has been used for a long time. It comes from genre, actually. I was looking into the history of the word. It came into prominence in the 50s with people like John Money and was Kinsey the 50s? I'm not entirely sure. Seamus knows all about this.
Yeah.
And so I started reading a bit about it. But gender was used as a word. Academically, they were trying to say it's like the social constructs around it. But colloquially, for most of English-speaking humans, it just referred to your biological sex.
Kinsey was 1947. It was when
Okay,
he founded the Institute for Research in Sex, Gender, and what was the other
Right.
one? Yeah,
So most people, when they say gender,
reproduction.
on your legal form, it says gender, M or F.
Right.
If it says gender and it's a reference to male or female, they're not talking about how you feel. They're
I used to
asking
get-
you about your body. And you know why they do? Because this is really important. In the early 1990s, there was a law that was passed. When they would do medical testing, they wouldn't do it on women. And then all of a sudden, people started realizing something. You know those painkillers we use during surgeries? Women keep complaining that it's not working. Hey, wait a minute. Hypothesis. Maybe these drugs don't work on women. Sure enough, they found out that certain painkillers work on men and women differently. And so then there was a law passed saying when you're doing medical testing, you have to have female and male trials. This is why it's very important they know what your biological sex is. Now that they're changing the definition of gender and then changing it back, it's the funny thing. We're getting to this point where there's a reason that we ask these questions. If someone collapses on the street and a medic runs up, it actually is important that they know if you are male or female for a variety of reasons. For instance, if a man screams and says, "Oh, my gut, oh man, it's hurting right in my pelvic area." Well, there's a very different reason that may be happening compared to why it would be happening to a woman. But it could be appendicitis and it could be a bunch of other things. And so there are some things, for obvious reasons, men and women have different organs, that a pain in a certain area could be something or could be one thing or not, for obviously. But my point is, there are certain medical treatments they will give to a male and not a female. And if they can't tell or they don't know, or they don't know that a person is taking drugs for gender affirmation, as they're calling it, well, then you could be seriously screwed up when a medic gives you a medication that is counterindicated by whatever it is you're taking.
Yeah, you got to make sure that people don't. There's a story of a woman that was following Google Maps or something, or Apple Maps, into the desert, and it was telling her to turn left, go straight, and she just kept following the computer into the desert. Her car broke. It was the wrong direction. So if someone just is like thinking gender is all that matters, what I think is all that matters, they're basically driving their car on this automated concept. If it gets to a point where you need to perform life-saving medical treatment on that person, and then you do the wrong sex because they've conflated what they feel with gender and their sex, then it's just like it could end up being catastrophic for someone.
Right.
Well, now the life-saving medical treatment that they're referring to is gender affirmation, because essentially they're holding these kids hostage in a way, saying like they're going to commit suicide if they don't get these treatments. Do you want them to commit suicide?
Yeah,
They're holding them hostage.
And the I think what's the crazy thing about it is, if you look at countries, Scandinavia, for instance, they've stopped doing all this. There was a big article I was reading the other day. Sweden is like, they're doing mental, therapies and stuff right now, because perhaps the solution to someone who's got suicidal ideation is not affirming what is driving their ideation.
Isn't Scandinavia, or maybe just the Netherlands, where assisted suicide
I don't think the Netherlands is Scandinavian. Are they?
I don't think so.
No, it's like Finland,
I was thinking
Sweden,
it was either in
Denmark.
Scandinavia or in the Netherlands.
So it's like Sweden had this big move where they were like, we're not going to do this. I don't know exactly where they're at now, but I know people have been talking about the Scandinavian countries being like, we have found that it's not actually reducing suicidal ideation. And so that's my thing. It's like, seriously, we don't want kids harming themselves.
Has it been found that it worsens suicidal ideation?
I don't
at
think,
all?
no, I don't know.
I don't keep up with
Yeah, I've read that it's, I've read some articles saying it's like no difference. But obviously it depends on what you read. If you read like advocacy websites, they're going to say, of course it's helping reduce these things. And it's like, oh, maybe, I don't know. What I do know is what these other countries have written, news articles from these countries that I've read, is that the mentality is, if someone is experiencing suicidal ideation, affirming what it is that is contributing to it is not necessarily an appropriate solution. So if someone is feeling, let's just say dysmorphic, a general dysmorphia like anorexia or eating too much, or, they want amputations or whatever, they were like, giving a person who is suffering from some kind of anxiety like what they're asking for is probably not the appropriate way to stop them from feeling this way.
It's kind of like if your kid is afraid that there's a ghost under their bed, and you're like, yeah, there is a ghost under your bed, and then you start building their room to protect from this fake ghost, and then the kid goes even crazier because it starts to think really but I agree that you do need to affirm these people. You need to affirm their existence. People need to be heard and understood and listened to. That's what these people need more than anything. You don't need to put the knives down for a minute and listen to these people. Like Jazz Jennings, we were listening to a video from her last night. She just released a book. I don't necessarily agree with what's in the book.
The book's been out for a while.
So she's had a book out for a while, but she needs to be listened to. We all need that. And it's not like it's do it or the world blows up, but to survive and for the betterment of humanity, people need to be listened to and understood.
Jazz Jennings person had parents who seemed to impose this identity since a very young age, like 2 years old, when they see their child who they think is a boy wearing a towel on his head, and then they're like, okay, you're a girl now. And then
Jazz said,
put them on TV, and we're just supposed to accept that as normal and
she was
watch
on a
it.
show.
That's our entertainment now.
This is what concerns me about Jazz in particular is she put out a video saying that since 2 years old, she's felt dysphoric or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I have concerns.
His first memory is even that early.
Yeah.
That's insane.
I have, can you guys remember when you were 2?
I remember peeing on my brother one time. I think I was like 4 and he was like, yeah, he was 2. I was 3.
But being 2 years old, I don't know. I don't know.
No.
So look.
Certainly nothing as complex as that.
I do have questions though. Like if we're going to talk about Florida and the parental rights and education stuff and the rights of the parents to choose what's right for their kids, then you have to define what your moral line is, because if we're then going to question the parents of Jazz Jennings, it's like, do we then intervene in their family as a governmental body? Do we say the government must intervene or stop that if we think it's wrong? Or do we then say, we don't want the government intervening in what parents think is right for their kids. And there's questions of if a kid really is, suicidal, and I'm not talking about 2 years old, and doctor prescribes something, do we as the layman then say we've decided to intervene? I mean, let's keep our morality logical, right, in the same path. So
I'm on high alert against medical tyranny, and for-profit surgeries on kids is devastating. It's really bothering me. But I think people also should have the freedom to do what they want with their bodies. Now, we talk about a kid. Kids don't have the ability to consent to things. The parent's basically consenting for them. And so is it ethical for a 45-year-old parent to have a 13-year-old kid cut? I don't know.
But what about the kids that have adopted that identity before they're adults, and then once they're adults, they continue to keep that identity and seek medical procedures because of it? I don't think that person has informed consent of the procedures that they're seeking.
Well, I don't think children can consent. So right.
But once they're adults and they've already been groomed to believe that this is who they are, they don't have the ability to make an informed consensual decision about the medical treatment.
I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, I can't make that decision for others. That's like a one-on-one
that
thing.
negates everyone's life. Look, I don't think children should be getting sex change surgery. I think that's like we're going down a dangerous path. But to say that you're 16 and you had an experience that informed you of something and you chose to follow that, so you can't be adequately informed because of that.
Okay, Jazz Jennings, since 2 years old, the parents have been in charge of that.
Right.
From what I can
is
tell.
Not going to come out.
And then Jazz Jennings, 18 and up, now has the ability to consent to further medical interventions.
Well, I think
after being groomed so thoroughly into believing that is their identity.
I see what you're saying.
That's not.
But the challenge.
It doesn't follow.
There's there's like a hard line for obviously like don't give sex changes to kids that I can't believe is actually a political debate that's happening right now. And to what extent does the government intervene when someone prescribes a medical treatment to a child you don't agree with? So I'm at a loss to be honest. Like I think it's great what Ron DeSantis did. I think that if you've got a law that's been from duly elected and a bill has been sworn, this is the question. This is the question for social media. What is YouTube's position on the fact that in Florida it is a crime to perform a sex change on a child? How do are YouTubers advocating for illegal activity now? No, what are the rules? So I'm saying, for me, I look at what's going on in Florida. We have consistently said over the past year, parents should have the final say in what their kids are and how to raise their kids. And then you get people coming out and saying, okay, well, my doctor said my kid should undergo this treatment. And it's like, no, I think you should. Wait a minute. I just said parents should have final say.
Yeah. But
there's obvious lines, though, like if a parent was abusing the child, and then we have to decide what those moral lines are. Simply put, Florida has decided no sex change surgery for kids.
Yeah. I mean, and in North Carolina, I can tell you, we had an interesting proposal made by the Duke Law School around homeschooling. And my wife and I homeschool our kids. And there was a proposal that was put forth to amend North Carolina's child abuse laws to define something called educational neglect. So what's educational neglect under this proposal? Well, when you start to boil it down, it really means if you're not providing an education that a judge deems to be adequate. So ultimately, judges make the call, but it becomes, sort of inherently politicized. So am I giving my child an adequate education if I'm teaching them that there are only two, male and female? Am I giving my child an adequate education if I'm teaching them, real American history, right? Like, so, to your point.
Are homeschooled students subject to standardized testing?
It depends on the state. In North Carolina, you have to test. I think it's every 2 years.
That's messed up. I'm totally opposed to that.
To run a home school. But do you draw lines to say for what parents can do, right? In terms of, okay, there's a difference between how you're going to educate your kids, right? And your control over the education of your kids versus making these kinds of decisions about your child's future and the ability of society to second guess those decisions.
We have a cultural problem. It always comes down to this. And this is what I want people to understand. If a parent says, I'm going to show my kids graphic images, it's like, okay, well, now you've got questions like, is this a violation of the law? Does the law define showing lewd images to children?
Child
it
abuse.
Does. You can't do that. However, the problem is these parents are going to doctors and the doctors are saying, this is what you have to do. Not only that, but often when the parents defy the doctors, the state comes in certain states and punishes the parents. So now you've got this is I'm telling you, man, when I talk about the bifurcation of this country, in Florida, for instance, sex change on children, not allowed. In other states, I mean, even in Texas, we saw that case where the mom wanted to transition the son, the little boy, and the dad didn't. And there was like the judge ruled in favor of the mom. So you've got these stories about parents who are like, a doctor said it, so they agreed. And then what we're supposed to say is like, well, you know, far be it from me to say what's in the what the child should get if a doctor is saying it. But then you have parents who can't even decide in some areas. When the doctor says it, they say no. Now they get in trouble. The inverse is Florida. It's illegal to do. Like we're getting to the point where you're going to have two states next to each other. One's going to Florida completely illegal. Then you're going to have another state being like totally legal. And then what? The mother's going to kidnap the kid to bring him somewhere to get this gender affirming health care, or what Florida refers to as prohibited child sex changes. Even the language on what's happening is totally different.
It's kind of the way it's supposed to be, that every state gets to pick its own way of being. And then we have a federal government to make sure that that there are some things that are just off the books. You can't drive 180 miles an hour anywhere in the country. You can't kill people legally.
You can drive.
Well,
you can kill
in
people.
my mind, more permissible than child sex changes.
Yeah, but Ian, you are incorrect. There are places in this country where you can drive.
Yeah, I was being hyperbolic and off the hip. That was stupid of me.
On private property, you can go as fast as you want. And they actually have permitted areas where they do high-speed testing. So,
well, the point is that
I'm being semantic on you, good sir.
You did a good job, Tim. Thank you for that. There are things that the federal government will say, "Yo, state, you can't say that's okay. Murder's not okay. You can't say that in your state. You know, you can't abuse your citizens." Basically,
I don't know. I don't know about that. Is that true?
Well, I mean, that's it. Really, it's an interesting question in light of the Dobbs decision, right? Because there are people on, the issue of abortion. Who believe, and there were briefs that were submitted in that case where people took the position that abortion is unconstitutional, just flatly, that unborn children are persons under the 14th Amendment, and that all states have to treat those persons equally. And so if a state would have to ban the murder of an unborn child. So abortion is flatly prohibited nationwide.
I honestly
under that analysis. Versus sort of the more classic conservative legal approach to the question, which is I think what the court ultimately adopted in Dobbs, which is that the Constitution is just silent on this question and it's an issue for each individual state.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.